So really excited to collaborate with Sureka tonight. I think most simply, I was just thinking one of the why Ignatian spirituality and yoga, why this kind of ministry and putting this out there. I think first of all, it's been really influential and impactful in my own life, my own journey. So I love doing it. So I love Ignatian spirituality and love yoga, and then to be able to share that in community with others, learn from others. So, and Ayurveda has been a practice that's complex. Courtney and I were just chatting. Courtney taught last week a really beautiful class, and it's complex. There's a lot going with Ayurveda, and so Sureka is going to give us a nice just introduction, a little entry point into it. And so whether it's just taking maybe one practice or knowing a little bit about it, it could be helpful for anybody. But I think as Christians as well, as a Catholic of where I come from, grounded in the Catholic tradition, I think a lot of these practices can be helpful for living this journey, this Christian spiritual journey. And especially amidst the many transitions that we've been in, amidst COVID, amidst transitioning in through the seasons. I think Ayurveda can be a really helpful way of integrating these practices into our daily life to help find greater health, find greater clarity. And so Sureka is a parishioner here, and we met when I first arrived in the summer a number of months ago, and I was really excited to be able to start dialoguing with Sureka. And from the very beginning, I was thinking, okay, how can we collaborate sometimes? So I'm excited this has come together here. So, so what we're going to do tonight is Sureka is going to give a presentation with, we emailed a leaflet that she put together, kind of an excerpt of a longer book of 100-some page booklet that she said I could share if people are interested. I printed out one copy on our table. I can show you our table in a little bit. Those who are in person can come up and take a look, but we'll share some pictures of some of the materials that Sureka sent. And so then after a bit of a presentation, moving through that leaflet, then we'll have a little time for some question answer. And then we'll move into a practice of it. And so for the practice, then I'm going to teach a 3-part practice, moving through the 3 different doshas. So a 10 to 15-minute practice on each one of these. So poses and pranayama, breath practices that could be helpful to balance that part, that dosha. So, so without further ado, let me turn it over to Sureka, and then we'll move on from there. So sound working all right? You can hear me okay? I'm gonna pin Sureka, or if I don't, you all can, and then we will hopefully both of us in person and all of you on Zoom will be able to hear and see very clearly. So Sureka, I didn't give the full introduction to you. Okay, let me say just a few things about Sureka. So Sureka was born in India and grew up in Tanzania, and then has been here in Ann Arbor for 30 years or so, and did studies in chemical engineering at U of M, and was introduced to yoga growing up from her parents. Some 26 years ago, began to get a more formal introduction to yoga, but Ayurveda has been part of her life throughout her whole life. And then in 2015 became a Ayurvedic health practitioner and counselor. So really excited, and went through the RCIA program here at St. Mary's Student Parish a few years back as well. So we've been in conversation about, how do we integrate this science, this philosophy of yoga philosophy and Ayurveda with our Christian tradition. And so I'm really grateful for Sureka, as we've been dialoguing these past couple of weeks, her care and thoughtfulness of trying to present Ayurveda in a way that need not conflict with the Christian tradition, but can be, so much of this can be really complementary to it. So, okay, enough of me. Sureka, I'll pass it to you. Thank you for being with us.
Hi, everyone. So as Father Bobby mentioned, I'm Sureka Dangor. And I think Father Bobby gave a wonderful introduction. And before I say anything else, I would like to begin by reading out the disclaimer, which you will see at the top of the leaflet. So this leaflet and accompanying presentation is for educational purposes only, and the information provided is not to be used as, substituted for, or considered to be medical diagnosis, treatment, or prescription. The content in these pages and the presentation is not medical advice and does not substitute for consultation with a qualified licensed healthcare provider. So with that out of the way, I'd like to first talk about the scope of this presentation. So the purpose of this talk is to introduce everyone to a very basic understanding of Ayurveda. And my focus is to key in on the simple, easy, and practical aspects of Ayurveda that can be employed by everybody in everyday life without too much investment of time or money. The other thing, being a Catholic, that I strive to do is to find common ground between yoga and Ayurveda and Christianity and Catholicism. And I try to practice Ayurveda in a way that is compatible with my Catholic beliefs. So that is one thing I am very particular about. And one thing I will not cover is herbs. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with Ayurveda, but a lot of people know it from the standpoint of herbal remedies and so on. The reason I want to avoid herbs and herbal remedies is because there are very strong potential drug-herb interactions, which could lead to serious complications if one is not careful. So I suggest if anyone is considering using herbs or herbal remedies, to consult with a physician who is familiar with drug-herb interactions. So with that said, Ayurveda, well, a lot of people are familiar with the term yoga, but not necessarily Ayurveda. Both yoga and Ayurveda come from the same source, basically ancient Indian philosophy. And Ayurveda is the 5,000-year-old system of medicine that's been practiced in India and also in South Asia, and it's becoming more and more popular now in the Western world. So the neat thing about Ayurveda and yoga is that they address all the dimensions of the individual, body, mind, and spirit. And specifically in Ayurveda, they believe that the human being is not just made up of the physical body, but there are what they call sheets of existence. So you have the physical body, and then over that is the energetic body, and then beyond that is the emotional or lower mental plane of existence. After that is the intuitive or higher mental plane of existence. Beyond that is your spiritual body or spiritual plane of existence. So Ayurveda seeks to address all these layers of existence and tries to attain balance among all these aspects so that one is balanced not just in body, but in mind and spirit. So the other thing about Ayurveda is, one thing that's different from Western medicine is that Western medicine tends to take a one-size-fits-all approach. You have this symptom, so you take this drug and you take, this many tablets these many times a day. But Ayurveda focuses on cultivating self-awareness of one's own unique constitution and tailoring the remedies to suit the individual constitution. So I will go through the leaflet and expand on the points as I go along. So one of the beliefs of Ayurveda is that the human being is a microcosm of the universe. So all the elements and energies that exist in the universe are also believed to exist within. So in Ayurveda, there are, for example, 5 elements that are space, air, fire, water, and earth. And they believe that the energies of all these elements also exist within the human being. And three terms that you'll hear a lot of are Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And these are basic mind-body constitutions that an individual is believed to be made of. Sometimes a person can be just of one type, sometimes a combination of two or all three. And these same energies and elements also exist, not just in the human being, but in all aspects of nature. So foods can have certain elements and energies, and even the taste of the food could impart a certain energy. The other belief is that the body and the mind have the ability to heal themselves. And I think this is one limitation, again, of modern medicine, in that it fails to capitalize on the body's ability to heal itself. So modern medicine has its place, and it's great for acute ailments, but for chronic ailments, this is where Ayurveda shines. And you could take a pill and it can fix the symptom really quickly, but it does not address the underlying cause. So say you have some symptoms and you take a pill, you might feel better, but if you do not address the underlying cause, once you stop the medication, you'll have those same symptoms again, and you just become dependent on the drug you're taking. So Ayurveda seeks to address the underlying cause and fix the situation so you can be free of all these afflictions. The other belief is that everything in nature, pretty much everything, can be used to bring the internal environment of the person back into balance by countering the unbalancing effects of the external environment. So this is why Ayurveda, for example, has not just a daily routine that they recommend people go through, but also a seasonal routine. So with each season, one is likely to experience certain types of imbalances. For example, now we're entering the winter season where there will be, very cold weather, windy weather, and so on. And there are certain things one can do to ensure that the body does not get out of balance due to these aspects. And so I talked about how each individual has their own unique mind-body constitution, and how developing one's awareness of one's own constitution is very important for rebalancing your system. And imbalances can occur if you get out of touch with not just your own nature, but with nature as a whole. And that's one, I guess, adverse side effect of modern technology. As Father Bobby mentioned, I was born in India, and a lot of these Ayurvedic practices were a part of my life since birth. And my parents grew up in remote Indian villages. So whenever I went to the villages, I could see how they lived, and they were so in tune with nature. There was no running water, no electricity, and therefore, when it gets dark, people retired and went to bed. And when it got light, people woke up and began their work. And the food was very simple and close to nature. There was really no consumption of processed foods. And due to no vehicular traffic, the air was pure and clean. And I think all these aspects really contributed to a very healthy, natural way of living. And I think we're realizing now more and more that it is important to be in tune with the body's natural rhythms, the circadian rhythms, and so on, and the cycles of nature. And the other thing is that there is a strong belief in the mind-body connection in Ayurveda. And they often think of the physical body as a metaphor for the internal state of being. In terms of the mind-body connection, I think now People are quite aware of this. And a simple experiment is, if you vividly imagine biting into a lemon, your mouth will water. And if you listen to slow, soothing music, your heart rate will slow down and become more even. So these are the kinds of things that Ayurveda takes advantage of. And the other thing about the mind-body connection and how the body can be a metaphor for the mind is that many physical ailments can often, not always, but often be a reflection of your mental and emotional and spiritual state. For example, if one has stiff joints, that could be indicative of a very rigid mental attitude. And if one has heart disease, it could be an indication of a sad or broken heart, because Ayurveda views the heart not just as the physical organ, but also as the emotional heart. Another example is the case of asthma. Many times it can be the case that the person who is suffering from asthma has someone in their life who the asthmatic finds suffocating because that person is extremely strong-willed. And that strong will is suffocating to the asthmatic. And if the asthmatic learns to be assertive and not be as sensitive to the strong-willed person, the breathing issues generally tend to resolve. Another example is cancer. Ayurveda does not have a cure for cancer. However, many people who have experienced a spontaneous remission of cancer have often done so after making dramatic changes either to their attitudes or relationships or careers or lifestyle. So these are examples of the power of the mind-body connection. And one thing that Ayurveda places a great emphasis on is diet. And diet is not just food. Diet is anything that we take in at all levels of life. It could be food, it could be emotion, it could be an experience, or it could be your environment. And so when we fail to process the diet properly, it can lead to imbalances. And if those imbalances aren't addressed, it can eventually lead to disease. So what Ayurveda tries to do is to detect these imbalances early, long before the onset of full-blown disease. And as we go through, I will talk about some of the ways that all of you can be empowered to monitor yourselves on a daily basis and detect imbalances just by observing your own digestion, sleep, elimination, and so on. So speaking of diet, one example of where Ayurveda tends to be very refined in these things is that typically people think of diet as food. And when we think of healthy food, we think that, okay, this is what we should eat. So Ayurveda talks not only about what you should eat, but when you should eat, how you should eat, and how much you should eat. There are certain times in the day when your digestion works better. So rather than eating at all odd hours of the day, typically they recommend that you have breakfast between about 7 to 9 a.m. And breakfast is optional. A lot of people are used to that. Lunch around noon, noon to 1 p.m. and dinner somewhere between 5 to 7 p.m. and to not eat anything within 2 to 3 hours of bedtime. And so that's the when. And then for how much, usually they recommend that at a meal, you consume no more than how much food could be held in your 2 cupped hands. So any more than that, you could be overeating. And you could end up with other ailments such as feeling heavy and bloated and so on. And in terms of how to eat, according to Ayurvedic philosophy, they recommend eating sitting down, so not driving when you're on the road. So eating while seated without distractions, in a calm, settled environment, and to not eat when you're upset or distracted or engaging in very charged conversations. And so you could try this yourselves, and you could try eating this way. And, many people say who suffer with overeating or being overweight will find that just by making this one simple change of eating while seated in a calm, settled environment, and actually focusing on the food that they're consuming, on the sight, the smell, the taste, the texture, and so on, rather than watching a movie at the same time, will find that they will end up consuming less. And the reason is that they end up feeling more nourished by the food that they have taken in, because they are paying attention to the food and being mindful of what they're consuming. So that's as far as diet goes. So Ayurveda is this vast science, and there are so many modalities, from diet to spices to herbs to massage to behavioral modifications, purification routines, and so on, and yoga and meditation, sound therapy. So there's plenty to pick and choose from. And I think that's one of the beauties of Ayurveda, is that regardless of your spiritual beliefs or lack thereof, there are many things that you can incorporate into your lifestyle and not have it conflict with your faith. So those are all the, fundamental beliefs of Ayurveda. And, I will cover, aspects of the body, mind, and spirit as we proceed. So the 4 pillars of health, I had talked about how you could be empowered to monitor yourselves and fix your imbalances on a day-to-day basis. So the 4 pillars of health are sleep, digestion, elimination, and for women, menstruation. Just by observing the qualities of these 4 processes, you can figure out in what way your body has become unbalanced and how to remedy those imbalances. So for example, for sleep, ideally sleep should be of an adequate duration and quality such that you end up feeling rested and refreshed. And if that's not the case, it is likely that you are suffering from some kind of imbalance. And that could lead to feeling fatigued or lethargic and so on. The other is digestion. If your digestion is good, you will not suffer from ailments such as gas, bloating, reflux, heartburn, and so on. And elimination, the 3 forms of bodily elimination are urine, stools, and sweat. And just by observing the quality of your own urine, stools, and sweat, you can figure out again what things could be off. As a simple example, say urine should ideally be a light straw colored and clear. And so if it's brownish or blackish, it's likely there is a vata kind of imbalance. I talked about the 3 basic mind-body constitutions, vata, pitta, and kapha. And if it's darker in color or has a strong acidic smell, it's likely there's a pitta imbalance. If it's sort of foamy or sweet smelling, it could be a kapha imbalance. And the same thing could apply to stools and sweat. You could look at what it looks like. And I don't know if there'll be time to go through all of those qualities, but I'll see how the time goes. And then lastly, menstruation. From an Ayurvedic perspective, menstruation is a time of purification. And what they recommend is that the woman take it easy and ease up on the regular routine. And many times, if you keep going, you could end up with certain ailments. For example, you could end up with cramping. You could end up with excessive bleeding. You could end up with fluid retention or swelling. And again, these are signs of imbalances that could occur. So these are the 4 pillars of health. I went into detail about, sleep, digestion, elimination, and menstruation. Okay. So moving on, I talked about how the 5 elements, 5 basic elements are space, air, fire, water, and earth. And food also comprises of various tastes. And in Ayurveda, they say that food comprises of 6 basic tastes. So the tastes are sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent. And ideally, you should be consuming food that has all of these tastes. And one way to address imbalances is to consume foods that have a certain quality or a certain taste or set of tastes, which I will go through now. As I mentioned, there are 3 basic mind-body constitutions, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And to determine what your basic mind-body constitution is, there are several online quizzes you can take. And I sent Father Bobby a couple of books, which are on the display table. A couple of those books have quizzes as well you could look through. And an experienced Ayurvedic practitioner would be able to determine your constitution simply by observing how you look, how you talk, how you walk, and so on. And if you went for a formal Ayurvedic consultation, the practitioner will also feel your pulse. And typically when we go to the doctor's office here, they look at your heart rate and blood pressure. In Ayurveda, usually they will feel the pulse here with 3 fingers, and they look, they feel the pulse at a certain location on the wrist, and each of the 3 fingers will indicate how your Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are doing and indicate imbalances. So there are, increasing layers of refinement, like within each finger, there are different areas that can indicate different areas of the body that are out of balance and so on. So that said, let's first look at Vata. So typically, a Vata person tends to be slender in build. They tend to have prominent joints. They tend to be very lively and enthusiastic. And these are good qualities, being lively and enthusiastic, but they're also prone to fear, nervousness, anxiety, and restlessness. And so if you're experiencing these qualities, fear and anxiety and so on, it's a good sign that you could be suffering from a Vata imbalance. And a person who is of a different constitution could also be suffering from a Vata imbalance. The reason being that we are all born with a certain innate nature, and that stays constant throughout our lives. But we can also go off balance depending on the effects of the external environment. So if you're exposed to a lot of stress and it's unrelenting, you could end up with a Vata imbalance where you are experiencing anxiety and nervousness and so on. And a Vata individual tends to have restless sleep. They often have trouble falling asleep. That's one. And in terms of elimination, they usually don't urinate, or they don't urinate much, or they suffer from constipation and so on. And with menstruation, their menstrual flow can be scant. So these are indications of a Vata imbalance. And the way that Vata can be aggravated in your system is through, as I mentioned, stress, and additionally, an irregular routine. So if you're going to bed at, say, 9 p.m. one day and then 2 a.m. the next day, and it goes back and forth like that, it's highly likely that you would have a Vata imbalance. So that's as far as Vata goes. And I should talk about the ways you can balance Vata. So One is through meditation, and I'll talk more about meditation as I proceed. But meditation is amazing because it will bring your body back into balance, regardless of your constitutional type and your imbalances, be they Vata, Pitta, or Kapha. So meditation is one way to bring your Vata imbalances back into balance. A good sleep routine is another one. Ideally, they recommend in general that you try to go to bed by 10 p.m. And you will find, you could experiment with this where you could try going to bed by 10 p.m. for 2 weeks and just see how you feel. And not use an alarm clock if you can afford to not use one, so that your body gets all the rest it needs, and just see how you feel. And the other way to balance Vata is through what they call Abhyanga, or oil massage. So traditionally in India, the parents give the children an oil massage starting in infancy. And then once the kids grow up, the adults, they do it themselves. And typically in Ayurveda, you'll see that a daily massage is recommended. Growing up, we did it weekly. And with this oil massage, you oil every part of your body, including your hair. And growing up in the tropics, we used coconut oil, which is a cooling oil. So again, depending on your constitution, you could use a warming oil or a cooling oil or no oil at all. So for Vatas, typically they would recommend a warming oil such as sesame oil. If that's too heating, you could try almond oil. And you basically oil yourself the way you would when you lotion yourself. You just stroke the oil all over your body, and you use long strokes while moving across the limbs, and circular strokes when moving over the joints. And if you're suffering from circulation problems, they recommend massaging towards the heart. If you're suffering from, say, muscle stiffness, they recommend massaging along the direction of the muscle fibers. So, but generally you could just say you could apply the oil the way you would apply lotion. And traditionally, after one applies the oil, bathing was done outdoors, and people would apply a paste of chickpea flour and water. And they would apply that to the skin over the oil and basically rub it off. And that was it. They didn't use soap. And sometimes they would use 1 or 2 additional substances. For example, turmeric. They would add turmeric into that mixture of chickpea flour and water. And that's great for the skin. Unfortunately, in the modern day, if you tried to do that, your pipes would get clogged. So what I do is, I do apply the oil, and then I use liquid soap, just bathe as normal to wash the oil off. And then you'll find you'll still have a very thin layer of oil still left. So that's Abhyanga. And I mentioned a regular routine. So that's important as well for balancing Vata. And the other way you could bring your Vata back into balance is through certain foods. So foods with certain tastes impart certain qualities and have a certain effect on the physiology. So if you're suffering from a Vata imbalance, you could benefit from consuming foods that have sweet, sour, or salty tastes, and reduce those that have bitter, pungent, or astringent tastes. And when I say sweet, it doesn't mean consuming sugar. For example, rice is naturally sweet, as are almonds, milk, ghee, which is clarified butter, and so on. In terms of salty taste, well, there's salt, but there's also foods like cheese and olives and so on. Sour foods, citrus fruits, grapefruit, lemons, yogurt, and so on. These are sour fruits. Bitter foods are, coffee is bitter, but as are leafy greens, these are also bitter, and there are some bitter spices. Pungent foods Well, these are the hot foods, the hot spicy foods. So chili peppers, radishes, garlic, and so on. These are pungent, and ginger, and they have a heating quality on the system. And astringent foods are more foods that have a drying effect, such as beans, and so on. And so these are ways that you could actually bring your system back into balance. So moving on to Pitta, Pitta individuals tend to be of moderate build. They tend to have a good muscle tone. They tend to have lustrous eyes and a melodious voice. And they tend to be very focused and driven to do well. And these are good qualities. However, you know, Pitta people can also face the risk of becoming very critical and perfectionistic. So that's one sign, or, you know, be vulnerable to suffering from anger, hatred, and so on. And so if you find yourself feeling these emotions, a lot of anger, a lot of rage, or if you find yourself being overly critical, it could be a sign that your Pitta dosha is out of balance. And one way that your Pitta could get out of balance is by overworking. So if you find yourself doing too much, more than your body can handle, that's one way that your Pitta could get out of balance. And one way that could also show up is through your sleep quality. If you find that you can't fall asleep, but then you awaken in the middle of the night and have trouble falling back asleep, that's a sign of a Pitta imbalance. And another manifestation of a Pitta imbalance is, inflammation, skin rashes, diarrhea, and so on. I mentioned that with Vata, you could suffer from constipation. With Pitta, you could have loose stools. And emotionally, you could just be experiencing a lack of contentment with things. And the way to balance Pitta, again, meditation. Another way is spending time in nature. Just taking a walk through the woods, or if you live in the city, just taking a walk in the moonlight can be very cooling and soothing for cases where the Pitta dosha is aggravated. Another way is to consume laxative foods. Examples are, ghee. I don't know how many of you are familiar with ghee. It's the form of butter that's popularly consumed in India. It's clarified butter. It's spelled Ghee. And you can find that in health food stores now. And milk is another laxative food that can be consumed. So these are the ways that Pitta can be balanced. And in terms of taste, if you can consume foods that have sweet, bitter, or astringent tastes, that's good for bringing the Pitta back into balance and to avoid the other three tastes, that is sour, salty, and pungent. So that's as far as Pitta goes. Did I talk about menstruation? I talked about sleep. Also, digestion, if you suffer from, say, heartburn, that's a sign, that could be a sign of a Pitta imbalance. And in terms of menstruation, you could suffer from excessive bleeding, for instance, or have PMS symptoms such as irritability. That could be another thing. So that's Pitta. And then the third constitution is Kapha. And Kapha individuals tend to be quite stable and loyal and loving. And they tend to be somewhat stocky in build naturally, and have good immunity, and generally slow in movement, slow in speech. So these could be indications of a Kapha individual. And, Kapha individuals, because of their innate tendency to be slow and calm and so on, can have a tendency to consume heavy foods and not be as active. And that's how their kapha can get out of balance. So even if you're a vata or pitta individual, if you say consume a lot of heavy foods, don't get adequate exercise and so on, you could end up suffering from kapha imbalances such as lethargy, sluggishness, lack of motivation and so on, and become more prone to colds and infections and such. And so the ways to bring your kapha dosha back into balance is, again, meditation. Another way is exercise. And a third way is Ayurvedic fasting. So Ayurvedic fasting is different from what people typically consider fasting to be, which is going without food. So what Ayurveda recommends is a more gentle form of fasting, which is where you replace one meal with liquid foods. So soups or smoothies, milkshakes, and so on. That's what Ayurvedic fasting is. And again, the number of times you do the Ayurvedic fasting or the number of times in a day you do it depends on your dosha. And so that's, and in terms of taste, so kapha is sort of the opposite of vata, if you will. So where vatas would favor more sweet, sour, and salty foods, if you're suffering from a kapha imbalance, it's better to reduce those very tastes. And so you reduce the sweet, sour, and salty foods and increase the bitter, pungent, and astringent foods. And a very simple way to do this is simply to add hot spices to whatever food you like consuming. And that's the beauty of Ayurveda, is that whatever food you like consuming, you can alter the qualities of what you consume by adding the appropriate spices. There are a variety of spices used in Ayurvedic cooking that can help with all sorts of issues, such as, it can improve digestion, it can ease congestion, it can help with elimination, and so on. So that's, I think I went through sort of the physical aspects. So coming to the mind, I mentioned how certain emotions can also throw your system out of balance. I mentioned how fear and nervousness can aggravate vata. So can excessive talking. Too much talking can actually deplete your energy and aggravate vata and throw your vata off balance. Similarly, with pitta, if you feel a lot of anger or hatred, that can actually create toxins in your physiology, which is extremely unhealthy, and also throw your pitta off balance. And with kapha, if you experience, a lot of attachment to people or possessions, like over-attachment, or feel a sense of greed or envy or possessiveness, that can also, in fact, aggravate kapha. That said, Ayurveda does not recommend repressing your emotions, because you may feel these unhealthy emotions, but by repressing or denying them, it can actually create internal pressure in your system that can erupt in other ailments and symptoms. So what Ayurveda recommends is, rather than denying or repressing your emotions, to simply observe and release them. So you observe whatever emotions you feel. You accept and honor your emotions. For example, it's quite natural that, say, you're driving along the highway and you get cut off. It's natural to feel angry or frustrated, but it's not appropriate, as some crazy people do, to step out of the car, take a gun, and shoot the person who cut you off. So rather, they recommend really just observing whatever emotions you feel, to accept them and just release them. Just accept that, yes, you're feeling this emotion, and you're feeling this emotion because of this circumstance or this person, and to just observe and let go. And the other ways that repressed emotions can affect health are through allergies. So if you repress vata emotions, you're likely to suffer from seasonal allergies and be allergic to, say, things like dust and pollen and so on. If you repress the pitta type of emotions, you're likely to be overly sensitive to spicy or acidic foods and suffer ill effects from consuming those. And if you repress kapha emotions, you could develop allergies to what they call kaphagenic foods, such as dairy and so on. So it is important to, take care of your emotions as well. And so that covers the 3 doshas. A couple of other terms that are used in Ayurveda are Agni, Ojas, and Ama. And, I'm sure, unless you're somewhat familiar with Ayurveda, you wouldn't really know these terms. So Agni is a Sanskrit term. It literally means fire. And, you could say a common word in English is ignition. And some people believe, IGNI comes from the same root as Agni, Sanskrit. So Agni in Ayurveda is your digestive fire or your strength of digestion. And if your Agni is good, you will be healthy. And Ojas is considered to be the end product of proper digestion. And if someone has a sense of vitality to them and their skin is radiant and they're healthy and strong, they are considered to have ojas. On the other hand, if your digestion is poor and toxins are accumulating in your system and build up, you could end up with what they call ama, which is basically the toxic byproduct of improper digestion. So the goal is basically to have good Agni so that you have abundant ojas and minimal to no ama. And almost all health issues from the Ayurvedic perspective are due to either a vata imbalance, a pitta imbalance, a kapha imbalance, a depletion of ojas, or an accumulation of ama. So with that, I'd like to move on to the top 5 recommendations for maintaining health. So one, as I said, is meditation. There are many forms of meditation out there. It's recommended that you meditate for at least 20 minutes a day, twice a day. If you can't manage that, at least once a day is good enough. And if 20 minutes is too long, at least 10 minutes, and if your life is very busy, you could start small and build up. So you could begin with just 10 minutes once a day and see how you feel. And my hunch is you will enjoy the process so much and notice so many positive benefits that you will naturally feel encouraged to extend that time. So ideally 20 minutes twice a day is recommended. The form of meditation I was taught was an effortless heart-based meditation. It's not Hindu in nature, and it's actually almost identical to the Catholic form of centering prayer. The main difference is where in the heart-based meditation, you had a mantra. In the Catholic form of centering prayer, you have what is called the sacred word. So, I don't know how many of you at St. Mary's know Father Joe Wagner, probably all of you do, but Father Joe actually recommended this book to me, written by a Trappist monk, Thomas Keating. It's called Open Mind, Open Heart. And he talks about the contemplative tradition in the Catholic faith. And it goes through the steps involved in centering prayer. And I can actually read out what centering prayer is based on. It's actually based on the saying of Jesus given on his Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus had said, "But when you pray, go to your inner room, close the door, and pray to your Father in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you." And of course, in addition to this, centering prayer also draws from the writings of other Catholic contemplatives, such as Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint John of the Cross, Saint Therese of Lisieux, and Thomas Merton, and so on. So the main steps in centering prayer are, the first is choose a sacred word as a symbol of your intention to consent to God's presence and action within. And to find out what the sacred word is for you, you could pray to the Holy Spirit and receive whatever word comes to you. Examples are God, Jesus, Abba, Father, Mother, Mary, Amen, and so on. In the Eastern tradition, it would be, a mantra. It could be as simple as Om, or, a certain phrase, which is a prayer. But I personally, being Catholic, I prefer to follow the centering prayer method. So that's step one. And step two, sitting comfortably with eyes closed, settle briefly and silently introduce the sacred word as the symbol of your consent to God's presence and action within. So by sitting comfortably, it just means to sit in a position with your back straight, such that you don't just slump over and fall asleep. And step three, when engaged with your thoughts, return ever so gently to the sacred word. And at the end of the prayer period, remain in silence with eyes closed for a couple of minutes. And if you're doing this in a group, you could end with a recitation of the Lord's Prayer. So I've tried this, I've tried the heart-based meditation, which has been great for physical health. I've also tried centering prayer, which is almost identical, but for the sacred word versus mantra. And personally, I pray the rosary every day. And I find that extremely fulfilling and calming, and very nourishing for me. I find that very enriching. So that's what I do for meditation. And sleep, I covered sleep. Ideally be in bed by 10 to induce sound sleep. Say about half an hour to an hour before bedtime, you could have a cup of warm milk. So I know in the West, a lot of people are used to consuming milk cold straight out of the fridge. But according to Ayurveda, that can actually not be so healthy for you and lead to kapha imbalances. So traditionally in India, milk is boiled with or without spices, and then left to cool until it comes down to a warm, drinkable temperature, then strained so you remove the clotted cream that forms on top, and then consuming it. And for those who find milk too heavy even after boiling, what you could do is boil the milk with a quarter cup of water. That makes it even lighter to digest. And if you want sound sleep, you could add some spices such as ginger at a minimum. You could do that. And now that we're entering into winter and there's the coronavirus pandemic raging, something that would be extremely good for immunity is an Ayurvedic recipe called golden milk. And so it's basically milk boiled with several spices. There are various recipes out there you could Google and find out. But my favorite is boiling milk with just a little amount of turmeric, little amount of dried ginger, cinnamon, cardamom, cloves, and just a tiny bit of ground black pepper. And so I boil the milk with these spices. And so when the milk comes to a boil, be careful because it can boil over suddenly and you'll have a big mess to clean. But as soon as it starts to boil, you turn off the heat and let it simmer for just a few minutes. And then after it's cooled, I strain it, add a little bit of raw honey, stir it and drink it. And that'll be great for your immunity and help with great sleep. If nothing else, you can just boil milk with ginger alone. So that'll help with your sleep quality. The other is a vegetarian diet. Now, Ayurveda does not prohibit meat. In fact, in certain situations, say, if your system is depleted or you're convalescing from an illness, they actually recommend consuming meat to build up your strength and nourish your system. But generally, on a day-to-day basis, they recommend a vegetarian diet or at least a predominantly vegetarian diet. And if you do consume meat, to try to have more of the lighter forms of meat, such as chicken and fish and eggs, rather than beef and pork and so on. In fact, one of the books that is on the display table is this one by Vasant Lad. Somewhere in there, I forget which page, he actually goes through a list of several foods and talks about the effect that it has on your physiology. For example, chicken can be very strengthening. Pumpkin seeds can be good for getting rid of worms in your system, and so on. So you could look through that at the end. So that's one way. And ideally, a lacto-vegetarian diet is recommended. But again, for individuals with who are prone to vata imbalances, a slightly heavier, more grounding diet would be good. So more eggs and maybe even more chicken and fish. And it's best to consume organic foods. So avoid packaged and processed foods as much as you're able to. And to have foods that are freshly prepared and as close to nature as possible. So, it's better to cook a tomato rather than have tomato paste in a jar that you get off the shelf, though they're both tomato. And I mentioned spending time in nature. That's the fourth health tip. Ideally daily, if you can manage that. Even just gazing at a plant or a tree and just communing with nature and tapping into just the intelligence of the universe and how God permeates everything in creation. That's one. And lastly, love. I mean, we all seek peace, joy, and love in our lives. But I think if one can cultivate the ability to openly feel, give, and receive love, many times we feel afraid of love, even though we want love in our lives. We're afraid of getting hurt. We're afraid of being looked upon as stupid. We're afraid of being vulnerable. But it is better to, I think, be open to love, open to feeling it, giving it, and receiving it. So these are the top 5 recommendations for maintaining health. Good. And so, I was going to go through the 8 limbs of yoga, but you have all that in the leaflet. And, the yoga asanas are great for physical health and mental health too. But if you're pursuing yoga as a holistic practice for the benefit of your body, mind, and spirit, I recommend following these 8 limbs of yoga. You'll find that in page 3 of the leaflet. And you'll find that the first 2 limbs are very similar to the 10 commandments and ending with meditation. But really, that's it. And then at the bottom of page 3, I have a few simple daily habits for improving health. And if anyone has any questions about those, I can talk about that in the Q&A. But really, that's it. And, thank you for your time. And I wish you all the very best. And I wish you a blessed holiday season. Thank you.
Surekha, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
So rich, so much there, but we have these pamphlets, and if anybody didn't get the handout that Surekha made, we'll send that to you. And and other materials, we'll take a picture and send those around. And I'm sure there's a lot of questions. So if you want to drop your questions into the chat, or we'll follow up with an email and have some chance to field questions in the coming days that we can share with you. So, but let's take a little moment to transition, and then I was going to go through a practice for each of the different doshas, but I think we'll just do a short, simple practice and have some time for Shavasana here to integrate all that. That I think one of the best ways to integrate and absorb and internalize all of that is to feel it in the body. And so we'll just do a short asana practice, a little bit of pranayama and some Shavasana over the next 20 minutes or so. So let's come to our mats. Just give me one moment to make this transition. Sureka, thank you once again so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Father Bobby, for the opportunity.
So let's move through a Surya Namaskar, a sun salutation, and feel free to adapt this as you need, but I'll guide us through a Surya Namaskar on both sides. So beginning just in mountain pose, in Tadasana, feeling yourself grounded, the roots growing through the feet, press down through the feet and extend up through the crown of the head, find length, and engage the breath. Breathing in through the nose if that's available for you. And let's inhale, bring the hands to heart center. Exhale, lower the hands down. Inhale, reaching up and back. Little back bend. And exhale, fold forward, little bend to the knees. And then step back, the right foot back, lower down to the right knee. And shine the heart forward. And your exhale, step the left foot back to meet the right, and you can come to knees or lower down. So either knees, chin, and chest, or lower down through chaturanga. And inhale, shine the heart forward, find length in the neck, lower the shoulders down. And exhale, lower back down, come to hands and knees, and then to downward dog. Either staying in hands and knees or coming up to the downward dog. And a little pedal out of the feet, bend one knee and straighten the other, press the hands into the ground. And then stepping the right foot forward between the hands, lower the left knee to the ground, shine the heart forward. Finding length in the neck, the spine. And then step the left foot to meet the right foot, fold forward. Bend the knees and reach the hands up to the sky. Little back bend and lower the hands down. And we'll repeat that, leading with the left leg. Inhale, reach the hands to heart center. Exhale, lower the hands down. Inhale, reaching up, little back bend. And exhale, fold forward. And step the left foot back behind you, lower the left knee. Hands to the ground, shine the heart forward. And stepping back to plank, top of the push-up. And again, lowering down, either knees, chin, and chest, or through the chaturanga, pressing the elbows in towards the rib cage. Inhale to your up dog or cobra pose. Soften the shoulders down. And tuck the toes, coming back to downward dog or hands and knees. And step the left foot forward, lower the right knee. Inhale, shine the heart forward. And step the right foot to meet the left foot, fold. Bend the knees, reach the hands up to the sky, a little back bend. And lower the hands down to your side. Let's just bring some movement side to side, awakening the spine. Maybe close the eyes. So for a Pitta person who's often very driven and somebody who's has a high pitta constitution, is often striving for perfection, worrying, maybe comparing to others. So maybe just practicing closing the eyes here for a moment. I'm a pitta dominant person, and so that chance just to not worry about going 100% or being perfect. Let's just practice this, closing the eyes and not worrying so much about what it looks like, but how it feels. So inhale, reach the hands to the sky. And then side bend over to either side, just taking a little side bend. Maybe you're reaching for your hand, for the wrist, or just letting one hand come down to the side and reach over. A little side bend, coming back to center, lift the hands up to the sky, and side bend to the other side. Coming back to center and side bend to the first side that you did, and then just take a fold forward as you bend the knees and making a little circle here, just a little kind of flow, making a slow, big circle, kind of this flowy, playful pose here, maybe switching directions. Maybe just folding forward with the knees bent. Just taking another 30 seconds here and move however you wish. No right or wrong way. Fold forwards, maybe just standing and breathing. So find whatever pose here for the next 15, 20 seconds. Maybe those circles if that feels nice. And let's widen the legs, come into a wide-legged stance. And reach the arms up to the sky, making a star shape. Lift the heart up to the sky and then fold forward. So again, here, some options. So maybe moving side to side, bend one knee and straighten the other. Maybe bringing one hand to the center, right under your face, and taking the other hand to the hip or up to the sky and taking a twist. So we're playing here in Pitta for a moment. So just find some poses here that feel right for your body. Twisting, moving side to side in Skandasana. Maybe bending the knees and coming down into that horse pose, or twisting out the spine. So taking another 20 seconds or so here just to move as you wish in this wide-legged stance. Just bring your awareness into the body. Feel the sensations. Notice how the body is speaking to you. And then coming down back to the front of the mat, and we'll come to hands and knees to tabletop pose. And tabletop here, get a little, choose your own adventure here, maybe cat-cow pose, maybe wagging the tail side to side, maybe taking circles with the hips. Taking some free movement here for the next 30 seconds or so. Cat-cow pose, circles, maybe child's pose, sitting back. Keeping that deep breath, that slow, deep breath in through the nose. Exhaling through the mouth. Coming down to laying down on the belly. So a nice pose for Pitta is to engage the belly space. So we'll move through a couple back bends here. So first Cobra, where we bend. So hands right under the shoulders. Lift the head, find length in the neck, a little back bend or a big back bend. So the option here, maybe with your breath, inhale as you rise and exhale lower. So maybe staying there for the next minute or so. Another option, the next step could be to go to locust pose, Shalabhasana. maybe clasping the hands behind you. And then the other option here that can really engage the belly and sometimes can be tough to reach for those ankles, but to come into bow, Dhanurasana pose. But again, just following your own way. And if you're in Dhanurasana or not, maybe just a little sway side to side, massaging the belly and navel center. Breathing. Releasing that and sitting back in child's pose. And from child's pose, just come to sitting up for a moment on your knees. And just to introduce one breath, a cooling breath here. So for Pitta, a nice cooling breath is called Sitali breath. So if you can make a circle with your tongue, like so, and it's breathing in and out of the tongue, and it's a cooling breath. So this is a form of pranayama that's good for balancing the Pitta. And so try that, just closing or lowering the eyes, resting your hands, make a circle with the tongue, and taking some gentle breaths through the curled tongue. There's just a little taste of Sitali breath, the cooling breath. And now let's move for our last 10 or 12 minutes into the Avata practice. So Avata practice, more of a grounding poses to cool. So we would have come into a tree pose, which is helpful for focusing on a point, but we're going to stay grounded here. So let's just swing the legs around and come into a staff pose. The hands at your side, find length in the neck. Just feel that grounding. Feel yourself making a connection with the earth. And then reach the arms overhead and begin to fold forward. Lead with the heart. Maybe just bringing the hands to the knees, to the shins. And your inhale, find length, and exhale, maybe folding a little bit, but not worrying about getting into some full expansive pose. Just finding the pose that works right for you. Maybe closing the eyes if that's comfortable. Couple more breaths, just grounding, feeling this fold forward, a nice pose to do in the evening. It's kind of turning inwards. And slowly come back up. And before we come down to our back, just a taste of one more form of pranayama, of breath control, of opposite nostril breath. So finding a pose, you can keep your legs long if that's more comfortable for you, or if you're able to cross. So we're going to do opposite nostril breath, Nadi Shodhana. And so just bringing your left hand, palm facing upwards to your lap, and then taking the right hand. And there's different methods of doing it. I do it with keeping my hand flat, but you can press your index finger, your middle finger towards the forehead. And so we breathe in through the left side first, hold, and then out through the right and back and forth. So I'll just guide us through there. So let's start by closing the right nostril with the right thumb. Exhale through the nose. Inhale through the left side. Close the left nostril with the pinky or the ring finger and exhale through the right side. Inhale right. Exhale, left. Let's do 2 more rounds of this just to get a feel for this. With the right nostril closed, inhale through the left. Close off the left nostril and open the right. Exhale, right. Inhale through the right. Close off right. Exhale. One more time. See, just very softly, gently, barely able to hear the breath. Inhale left. Gently sipping in the air through the left nostril. Close left. Exhale gently through the right. Inhale through the right. And exhale left. Letting both hands come down to your lap or to your knees. And breathing in through both nostrils, just watching the air come in through both sides of the nose. And exhale. So that alternate nostril breath is a balancing pose, a balancing practice that helps bring equanimity and homeostasis into the body. Let's come on down to our back. Couple final poses here, kapha poses for kapha balancing. So let's bring the right knee up towards the right shoulder. And then begin to guide the right leg over to the left, taking this spinal twist, supine spinal twist. Try to keep both shoulders pressing towards the ground, maybe using the left hand on the top of the right thigh, the right knee. Turn the gaze over the right shoulder, away from that leg that's crossed over. Gently coming back to center, switching legs now. Let the right leg come long, left leg squeezes in towards the chest and over towards the left shoulder, left underside of arm. Really good pose for the digestive system. And then slowly start to guide the left leg over to the right, maybe shifting the right hip underneath the left. Both shoulders soften down and turn the gaze across the left shoulder, the left arm. Feel the breath, feel the twist in the spine, the openness in the chest. And coming back to center, the option to squeeze both knees into the chest, give yourself a hug, give yourself some love, one of those key components that Surekha talked about for our wellness. Maybe a happy baby pose, reaching inside the knees for the outer edge of the feet. If there's any final pose, and we'll begin to transition towards Shavasana, corpse pose. Begin to extend the legs long. Let the feet fall open. Palms face up to the sky. Finding length and straight line from the tailbone up through the spine, the neck. Maybe close the eyes if that's comfortable for you. Begin to just settle, let go. Feeling the connection to the ground. Be following Sureka's explanation of centering prayer. Maybe there's a word, maybe an image that you can just feel and dwell into. Maybe just resting for a moment in the palm of God's hands, feeling yourself just cradled by the divine love. Just taking another moment to rest, stay with that word or that image. We pray in thanksgiving for this opportunity to learn from these rich spiritual traditions and wisdom. We pray that we may each discern how God might be calling us. Pray that we may be able to find the grounding, the connection to care for our full self, care for the fullness of who we are. We may be open to receiving God's love and grace, and to be able to make a return of that. Dear God, we ask for blessings on our week ahead. We pray that this session may be an opportunity for nourishment, for transformation. I invite you to take a moment if there's any prayer, any intention you may have, or any words that God may want to speak to you in this moment. Beginning to bring some awareness back to your breath, back to your body, bringing some movement to the fingertips and to the toes, the wrists and the ankles. And then reaching the arms overhead, taking a morning stretch, and slowly making your way to fetal position on one side, coming through this posture of rebirth. And keeping the eyes closed if that's safe for you, and slowly start to make your way to a seat. Coming back to an upright pose. Just taking a moment to notice And just noticing the breath, noticing any feelings. How has the Spirit been at work this evening in this group, within your own body, spirit, mind, and soul? Reach the arms overhead, bring the palms together, and press the thumbs against the forehead. May you have a calm mind. Maybe just offering a little massage with the thumbs on the temples and the forehead, that abhyanga, a little bit of love to your head. Bringing the thumbs down to the lips. May we care for our bodies. May we care for what we put into the body, our diets. May this channel be a place of peace, of cleanliness, of compassion, both to our inner body and what we put out into the world. And bringing the thumbs down to heart center. Feeling this heart space, this connection with the divine. Feeling Christ's presence dwelling within. And just taking a moment to bow forward, honoring God in all things, honoring the divine spirit within, around, and beyond. Namaste. Amen. Well, thank you all for being here, those of you on Zoom, those of you here in Ann Arbor. And thank you so much to Sureka for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. We will surely have questions and follow-ups, so we'll be in touch with all of you, and hopefully can continue to learn from you more in other ways. So I think I'm probably a couple of minutes over 7:45 here, so we'll end there. Thank you so much, and next week we'll be back here again, Zoom and in person, with Ellie Kroom talking more about Ignatian spirituality and her journey. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.